Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to be talking about technology now, not the familiar machinery of refineries and oil fields and drilling rigs, but a number of technologies that fall under this broad banner of digital. And this brings in everything from big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the ways this has been transforming the oil and gas industry, the extent to which the industry is keeping pace with some of the way these technologies are being applied in other sectors, and what promise these technologies hold for the industry in the future, particularly in line with the theme of this conference, as we consider strategies for the energy transition. So to discuss this, I am joined by an excellent panel, starting from your right, my left. We have Morag Watson, who is Vice President and Chief Digital Innovation Officer with BP. Antoine, who is President and Founder of oil market data firm Kayrros. Chetan Desai, who is Vice President Digital with Schlumberger. And Abdul Nasser Mughairbi, Digital Senior Vice President in the Executive Office with ADNOC. And we were just talking before this panel, and one thing that's rather interesting and tells you a little bit about the way the industry is changing is that none of the jobs our panellists are in, the positions, the roles with their various companies, existed before 5 years ago. So it's a very, very modern panel looking at the current state of the industry and what the future holds. So I would like to start just with a comment I came across on one of your websites, I won't say whose, which I'd just like to hear what you think about, which was this. Knowledge and data are at our fingertips in our personal lives, but in our industry, we are playing catch-up. So maybe, Morag, I could start with you. Is that still true?
A telling question, right? Is it still true? So I think what we have to remember is that the oil industry in general, and particularly in aspects of the oil and gas industry, we've actually been very forward and leading in the implementation of digital in the past. If you think about the subsurface, you think about how we do with seismic, you think about what we do in trading, you think about optimization in refineries and things like that. So traditionally, really the sector has been quite a leader in the adoption of digital. And I think really over the last 5 to 10 years, I think, that's when the shift really happened, and it moved from the innovation in digital being in the industry, in the industrial sector, to actually moving into the consumer and customer sector. And that's where we've seen the huge strides in terms of big data and analytics, and arguably the oil industry and the energy sector has been quite slow to adopt that. But I think over the last 5 years, I think in particular, the area of big data and analytics and basic AI, I think all of the sector has started to adopt that at a fairly rapid rate. Now, are we still behind others? I don't know. I guess there's always more to do, and it will never be over, would be my take on that. But I think certainly in terms of being behind some of the other sectors, yeah, I think the gap is definitely closing.
Okay. I mean, what do others think about that? Antoine, what's your thoughts on this?
So my recent experience is that the industry is able to catch up very quickly. Because I started Kayrros 3 years ago. Now we are, from myself, and now we're 150 people. And we have almost every majors, as customers. We have 100 of the top largest energy companies as customers. So we went from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time. So clearly, I think there is a huge appetite for digital and technology if this can bring value to the business. And if you have AI that works, so you don't do AI to do AI, but you do machine learning that really brings value for various part of the company, then the adoption is very quick. And this is the experience I had recently.
Okay. So if we think about some of these technologies and what they've been able to deliver, we think about digitalization and big data and some of these ideas, what are the biggest changes? Where have they made the biggest difference in the industry over the last 10 years, say? I mean, Chetan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think the way I would frame it is in the last 10 years, compute probably has been the biggest change, in particular high-performance compute. Largely done in data centers. There is a shift there happening to the cloud. which brings a certain level of elasticity. But I think high-performance compute probably made very good steps with the advent of graphics processing units, et cetera. I think probably just to rebound a little bit on Morag's comment about where we stand versus consumer usage of data and access, I think democratization and integration of data in our industry is the particular challenge. We are a data-rich industry, but not operationalizing that data. Like using 5-10% of all collected data in the industry is probably state of the art today, right? And so there's a long way to go before we get a lot more use of it. So I think if I look at the last 10 years, I would say, yeah, compute. I think the next, maybe not 10, but the next 5 years is all about data. All of the digital transformation agendas that we see across the industry are all predicated on doing something fundamentally different with data.
Okay. Abdul, Nasser, your company, ADNOC, has been going through a much broader transformation in recent years. When you think about these kind of technology uses, where have you seen the biggest changes at ADNOC in recent years?
Well, first, I would like to add to what they're saying. I believe that we've always had a lot of data. Our downstream industry is very much automated, and I think everybody's industry is very much automated, and we use data on a regular basis for decision-making, LP modeling, we use mathematics all the time. It is the democratization of data that's currently important. We only use a certain percentage of our data. Mm-hmm. The availability of information to the right people at the right time is what we think our digital transformation is all about. One important aspect, it's not only the data and the availability of data, because currently data in the subsurface and in the upstream, you see it in different platforms that are not integrated together. And that is a drawback that's not allowing us to access data, all of it at the same time. Mm-hmm. But what is really critical for us that we have noticed in the last 2 years from doing digital transformation is that 70% of the effort is going toward changing the culture and the business process. The people, it's not only the utilization of data, mm-hmm. and people don't want to change because we have been successful, we are making money, we are moving forward. What's the reason? We have to build the case for change. Mm-hmm. And fear that AI and data analytics and all these things will take people's job rather than help people to do better their job. That has been our case. But data is at the heart of it. It will continue to be. Accessibility of data is the key aspect of it.
Yeah, I think to me, given the theme of the event here, mm-hmm. the ability for us to connect as technologists, mm-hmm. digital technology to the transition and the sustainability of the industry, which is all about efficiency. It is all about whatever resource transition as a source of supply need to happen. This is the next value pillar for how to brand digital inside our industry.
Okay. So we see speeding up the process is very important. Currently, field development, process building plants takes years. And really the economics change in this period of time. So how fast we can bring products into the market, how accurate is our drilling. I think data and AI will help us get there in a much faster way.
I just wanted to follow up, and maybe come to you, Morag, on this. Is this point about, okay, we're able to do things faster, we're shortening lead times, et cetera. And this is, I think, touches on quite a big question here. Do these new technologies just allow the industry to do existing jobs quicker, faster, better? Or does it really expand the scope of what the industry is able to do? And I suppose I'm thinking about, we said we're not talking about the sort of traditional kind of technologies for the upstream and the downstream. If you think about things like horizontal drilling, that unlocked new resources, that expanded the footprint of what the industry can do. So is digital and its associated, kind of technological ideas, is that just about doing things better, or does it really expand what the industry is capable of? Morag, what's your thoughts on that?
So my team, what we do, how we look at, so my team looks at emerging digital, so not necessarily the digital that's what we call here and now, but the stuff that's on the horizon, such that we can be thinking ahead about how we might want to think about it. And we ask 4 questions, and the 4 questions that we ask is, so how could this potential digital technology actually impact our current business? Does it make it faster? Does it make it better? Does it make it cheaper? Does it make it safer? Does it take humans out of harm's way? How could it impact in that way? But more often we ask the following questions, which is, and how could this disrupt our industry? So how could this actually radically make a part of our business completely irrelevant, actually? And so how should we be thinking about that from the disruption point of view? And it could be, actually, it so reduces the cycle time in something that I don't know, maybe exploration is just an activity that's done like that now as opposed to a big department. Or maybe actually having autonomous vehicles makes it a very different proposition around what a forecourt does, which is a huge part of our downstream business. So it's about how does it disrupt? And then the third question we ask is, what new business opportunities might be available to us? And one of the ones which we've talked about publicly is about using blockchain to actually enable a whole different kind of trading where you start getting into the peer-to-peer trading space. And maybe that's a new opportunity to do things differently. And then the fourth question that we ask with respect to digital technologies is, how does it impact the world? And I know that's like a huge, huge question, but we have to think about that because the world is full of our future customers, partners, employees, stakeholders, governments. And so if we're not looking at the macro impacts of some of these technologies that go well beyond the borders of how we think about energy, then we're kind of going to miss it. So in answer to your question, it's way more than our current business and all these other things.
If I can add, John. So, sorry, Antoine. So if you think about better, faster, cheaper, there is always a tipping point, right? Thomas Cook is not around today for a reason. People still go on vacation, right? Ride-hailing for taxis, that industry didn't go away. So at a certain point, better, faster, cheaper reaches a tipping point where it is disruptive. So in my opinion, we have case studies today, field development planning for assets, 18-month business process inside an operator company running finite number of scenarios, shrinking to 18 days. Okay, well, that better, faster, cheaper is past the tipping point. It will change the way that company works, right? I think there is significant disruptive potential like this. There is new stuff, but there is really, really fast, really, really cheap, can be very disruptive also.
Right, so even if that's maybe that's a reductive kind of way of describing it, but it can still be very transformational, as you're saying. Antoine, I was going to come to you as well, because I suppose in this idea of, does this technology allow the industry to do more? That's really part of the whole ethos of Kayrros, is that you can do different things with data that we weren't able to do before.
Basically, what we do is we bring a technology that's been used by the military up to now, which is satellite imagery, and thanks to computing and deep learning that we can apply to images, and the availability of high-frequency satellite imagery on a global basis, we can make this technology available for commercial purposes. So it's the same kind of transformation as the Internet Protocol or GPS. So it was for the military, and now it's becoming commercial. And we believe that this will have a systemic impact. And I will take two examples in terms of cheaper energy. If you can model the full supply chain of energy, you can have basically what economists are saying, 5 to 10% decrease in the overall cost of the industry. So this technology, so satellite imagery and transparency, is in order of magnitude of saving 5-10% cost of the overall cost of energy. And the example of ADNOC is very telling because we were able to give real-time view on what was happening. Mm-hmm. We were able to precisely confirm what the Saudi were saying, able to track the barrels and really look at the barrels removed from the market and the rate of discovery, and this was essential in removing the fear from the market. So de facto, giving transparency has a huge impact on the cost of energy. The second thing that will be systemic is the ability to track emissions. We can track emission from big polluters, so combustion-related emission today. And if you do that, you give government the tool to have a carbon price. So the ability to track emission from the sky is not something small. It is going to be absolutely essential in the ability to track emissions, allocate them to polluters, and then enable a price, even though the asset is not in your own country. So this is really technology that are, by definition, transformational, like we've lived with GPS or internal protocol.
Okay. There's a point there you're touching on about the energy transition and how some of this technology can play into that. We should come on to that again in a minute. But there's one other question I just had on this data point. You're saying, this has always been a data-rich industry. We're finding new and faster ways to manipulate it. But I'm just wondering, how easy is it? There's an expression that's used a lot that every company is a data company these days, even if they don't realise it. But how easy is it to really do that in the oil and gas industry? Because you're spending so much time dealing with the external environment, with reservoirs, subsurface, all this kind of thing. Abdul, what do you think? Is that one of the biggest challenges in this area?
Yeah, it's a challenge to fully utilize the data, but I don't think we can ever be a data company. We are still an oil and gas company. We still drill. We produce the oil. We process it. We do refining, petrochemicals. So for us, data is an essential product of our exploration. It's a product of what we do, and to utilize it to improve our facilities, to improve our safety record, our emissions. That's what we're looking at. But data alone, without the physical models, the thermodynamics, and how we do it, it doesn't work for us. Maybe in terms of marketing, trading, as you go out, but within the physical constraint of our facilities, our processes, our fields, there are a physical constraint that data plus the physical model together, married with data science, that will create value for us. Currently, we only use 10% of the data, 15%. The ability to use 100% of the data with AI will lead us to a point where data is utilized more, but we are still an oil and gas company rather than a data company.
There's almost a comparison there, it seems to me, with recovery rates. We've got these numbers are making me think of historically the improvements we've made.
So we can get more recovery, probably.
Data recovery,
Hopefully more than 5%.
We're 45, 50, 60 maybe.
Let's just go back to this point Antoine raised when you talked about emissions tracking. This is a key thing with this is, okay, these are technologies that are getting widespread use in society, consumer electronics, other industrial sectors, but the oil and gas industry, the energy industry, is facing this particular challenge now with the energy transition. So how are these technologies, digitalization, artificial intelligence, etc., how are they going to help the industry deal with the energy transition? How do they help sort of solve those problems? Morag, have you got any?
So we recently made an announcement about doing continuous methane monitoring on all our new projects, and essentially what was behind that was that about 3 years ago I was sitting in a room with a couple of colleagues, and I was like, what if we could take all these technologies and we could do that? Because 3 years ago we couldn't have even, it was a dream, if you like, to say we could do continuous monitoring. And just to put that in perspective, how methane used to be, methane currently is tracked within or reported within the industry is through calculations and estimations, and everybody does it in the same way. But if you could actually see it real time, so some of the technology that Kayrros has, if you could actually see it real time and you could actually quantify what you have, then actually what you can do is you can deal with it. Right? You can go and mend it or retain it in the pipes or whatever. So what we're doing is using a combination of things like drones, sensors, hyperspectral imagery, a bunch of very complex and great algorithms. We're actually able to take the data in, synthesize it, and actually be able to say, actually, this is what's going on here, and this is what you need to do, and you can actually prioritize it. So that's a great example of a direct impact that digital technologies are having to do something that we just probably couldn't do before.
I think beyond digital technologies, I think particularly in upstream, there are technologies, we have some in our portfolio that are quite relevant even if we move on from oil to gas to geothermal to carbon sequestration to CCUS. I think there is fundamental capabilities about the subsurface that are quite transportable, and we will aspire to leverage all of them. So there is other ways in which technology can play an important role in this transition story.
One important part, I think, that will develop tremendously is the computer vision part, is the cameras. We used to use cameras only to monitor platform, people movement, things like that. Currently, we're able to use cameras in different spectrums, teach it to look for emissions, to measure flaring, quantities, even do some laser excitation. You can even do quantitative, really, in certain case. When you add this with the data that you have, knowing which stream, which valve is open, all that, all of a sudden, the ability to see now is no longer you need a human being. Actually, with the camera, you can see deeper, further, and more clearly. Boreholes, X-rays that we have in geological X-rays, boreholes, pictures, how do we analyze them? If we use AI, we might be able to analyze 1,000 a day or less or more, and that will give you a lot.
We're working on that.
And so are we. So is everybody, I think.
I think
but there is
opportunity.
Look, there is a limited, look, in the end, our business is, yes, vast, but it is limited in steps. And all of us, I think, are working within these parameters. We're working. One thing we don't do good is we don't collaborate very well with each other because of the competitive advantage. And I think there has to be a time when we start doing data on share basis rather than need-to-know basis, on need-to-share. So we need to start sharing more data, helping each other to reach that step further.
But I think in of itself, I just look at some of the things that we're doing with some of our partners and arguably at industry level. So something like a blockchain actually allows you to be able to share in a much more open fashion than you ever could before. And if there's some things that you actually are proprietary, you can keep that back. So it's actually enabling a completely different level of sharing in a completely different trusted environment. I'm not saying you'd always use blockchain everywhere, but it's like we've even seen, perfect examples of where that's happening right now.
We use blockchain for transferring hydrocarbon between our facilities. We have 14 companies, and we buy and sell products from each other. And in some cases, the systems are 20 years old, where you go to the meter, read the meters. Now, we put it all on blockchain. So it's like smart contract executed immediately between operating companies.
So you can do business with yourself now.
Exactly.
Amazing.
But that's an internal thing. How can we make it, how can we expand it to work with our partners, shareholders, other activity? That's the thing. And working with companies like, with the consortium like VACT and other, I think bringing all this together will get us there, I hope.
So it's why, the satellite today, enables to track every day the emission on a global basis. So it really goes on demand. What was said, what we spent this morning. So how do we influence demand? So if we can track the power plants, so the actual use of energy, and allocate that to companies and to product, then you can influence demand. Because the key thing today is our technology is not going to improve our operation, which is fine, because the emissions which are linked to our industry are relatively limited, but how we can influence demand. And we believe that this technology, which is basically being able to monitor what's happening everywhere in the world, very precisely every day, is going to influence demand, because you can, show exactly what's happening. And by the way, the NGOs are going to have access to this information at some point in time. So, it will be naked. So it's better to know it.
There's a couple of things you've raised here in this discussion that I wanted to just come back to. And this is really about the relationship with this kind of technology. And what I mean by that is, do you need to be owners of it? Is it okay to work with partners outside? Because this is, as all of you have said, it's transformative, but it seems to be the industry is quite dependent on outside expertise and working with partners on a lot of this kind of thing. Is that the way this is going to work in the future? Is there going to be a desire on the part of ADNOC and BP and companies like them to bring more of this expertise in-house? Because, as you say, there's a kind of proprietary issue around here with some of these things. There may be some benefit if you think about the culture around some of these breakthroughs, open source computing, etc. The culture is very much about sharing, but that's not necessarily, I imagine, how every company will want to proceed with this. There'll be a premium on some kind of proprietary access, in-house expertise.
So I think just while we are beating down our industry in contrast with all the digital natives around collaboration, and Mr. Van Wuden, this morning talked about collaboration. Just 2 weeks ago, in the upstream space, it's not across upstream and downstream, in the upstream space, a lot of companies that are in the audience here today configured together and launched data standardization and data sharing initiative called OSDU. It was led by a bunch of operators, BP, Shell, Equinor, Total. We are participating in it too. This is got absolute potential to leapfrog our industry in terms of extracting value from this data from a cross-industry collaboration perspective. Into this setup, my company has donated about 200 man-years of platform development work into a full open source environment, patterned after the best digital native companies that have developed all of the cloud infrastructure, et cetera. So we are moving. The industry is changing. To go back to your question about are we structurally orienting on collaboration inside and outside our companies and how we integrate this technology for the benefit of our industry, there is lots of movement in this area, even in our industry. So I think the indicators are there that the dynamics within our companies on technology access and integration are changing.
I mean, this is kind of for Antoine and Morag, I guess. I mean, Antoine, you're a startup entrepreneur on the panel here. You've built a company up over the last few years. I think you were telling me about the average age of the workforce is impressively low. That you've obviously managed to do that in the last 4 years. But if BP or an ADNOC was trying to do something similar and bring that kind of develop that kind of expertise, that would be, I imagine, maybe a little more challenging.
So does he answer or do I answer?
I don't mind. Whoever feels like going first.
So you can go on the back of mine, okay? So yes, historically, I would say overall in our industry, I mean, there is a challenge in maybe attracting talent. In my team, per se, no, there isn't. So my team is 44% female. We have many different generations in my team. It's very small, it's 25 people. So we are kind of like a startup in a way, trying new things. But we have not had a problem attracting talent into my team. And partly I attribute it to, you know, I know our industry is somewhat on a bit of a down, but I can't think of anything more exciting than actually working to solve some of the biggest challenges in the world. It's like, you know, and to use amazing technology that's at the bleeding edge. I mean, wow, the people that come into my team are like, well, actually, I quite like to have the opportunity to work on bleeding edge technology and apply it to something real, as opposed to just working on bleeding edge technology for technology's sake, for it then to go someplace else. So the combo of having the opportunity to use and do some groundbreaking development in bleeding edge technology and apply it to some of the most relevant and biggest challenges is what excites people. So I don't know, do you want to follow that?
So first, it's the medium age is 24, because the average is a bit higher because of my own age, you know. So yes, 24. So it's 150 people. It makes a shock every morning. We work on oil, on coal, so there is no problem to attract people to work on what is called dirty energy. We work also on solar panel and renewable, but I think there is no issue on working in this industry. I think what is more important is the work environment. I have no organigram, so it's small teams, they work together, they decide what they want to do, they have free time to do their own research. So I think it's much more linked. It's not the subject, as long as you have the means to develop something, so they need to feel empowered to do that. It's more the way they work. So first you need to be in central Paris, not in the suburbs, so in a decent environment. So we are at WeWork, so I don't know how long it will last, but...
Okay.
It's really more the work environment that matters.
I just wanted to ask one last question. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here before we open it up to the floor. This has all been very positive about the changes being wrought by this technology, but I just want to ask for a minute about the downsides here and the risks and the vulnerabilities. Because more data, that sounds great, but that means there's some challenges in managing that data breaches. The more you're dependent on AI and computing, that raises cybersecurity risks. I mean, what are the new kind of challenges that this throws up as well? There's lots of pluses, but there's clearly some dangers here for the industry if it gets a little complacent or negligent in certain areas. I don't mind who wants to go first on this.
No, I would. One that you haven't mentioned, which is something that we've been thinking out, and it is a fairly big topic, is about bias and some of the ethics around some of the data, and how you use it. And something that we have to think carefully about is if you, so we all have biases, right? So it's not new. So the plus side is if you're using AI and you're using big data to start solving some of your challenges, yes, that data has bias in it, but now at least it's explicit. Because before, all the bias was sitting in all your heads and you were making decisions anyway, you just weren't talking about the biases. Because mostly, actually, you don't know, they're unconscious. So the good news is now that's explicit. The bad news is now it's amplified, because as soon as you've got an algorithm that can run something 1 million times or can make it available to a much wider audience, you've suddenly got to think about, so this is particularly in your customer, consumer, employee space, less, well, I was about to say less in the technical space, but that's actually not true, because there's even bias that's in modeling. And when you're developing subsurface models, it'll have the bias of whoever did that interpretation. So we talk a lot about cyber and how the greater dependence on digital means that there's more of your business that's maybe possibly potentially exposed. But I think equally one of the challenges is this whole notion of AI and ethics.
Okay. Abdul, sorry.
Over-dependency on these biases, over-dependency on these analysis can lead us to a certain situation where the information that we put in and the information to get out, we can make wrong decisions because we really over-trust these algorithms and this. So I think the danger is removing the human element from the equation is a risk that we don't want to take ourselves. Too much information can lead into paralysis as well. It's not knowing which decision to take. So
it's important to use these technologies to speed up some decision making, but you need to retain this kind of human judgment element in here.
Being a national oil company, it's very important for us to raise the level of our people. Most of my team, just to come back to the subject, are in their late 20s, early 30s. So we are, in general, a very young organization. So they adapt this, they love this technology information. We're becoming the new good company to work with in the UAE.
I think for me, cybersecurity is probably top of mind, I think, or should be top of mind for the industry. Its landscape is getting more complex, not less. And then I echo what Nasser said. I mean, I think change management is probably a much bigger hurdle than the technology. Yes. Technology is available today to achieve these things. Inside our industry or outside, we can bring it in. That's not the issue. Change management is
changing the culture. We've got time, I think, for a couple of questions here. We have microphones available, and we have a question over there. Yep, sure.
Hello. Evan Stefanik from Saudi Aramco. My question is, what challenges are you seeing regarding the implementation of digital strategy, especially if you're under pressure to deliver large, tangible results?
Can I answer that, please? Aramco and us, we're in the same boat. Exactly, under a lot of pressure to deliver value fast. And yes, there is a lot of pressure because you are spending money, you're trying to do things, and they want to generate value. Our industry is based on generating value. My trick has been is to take it from the low-hanging fruits. I mean, start the digital transformation, start on use cases that have low-hanging fruits that you already know from your experience, that a little bit of digital, a little bit of analysis will lead to this potential. In reality, you could have done it without digital, but putting it in the frame of digital will add strength to the digital transformation of the company. But this is the challenge in getting money and going through the process of any oil and gas companies, how to get the budget to do something when you don't really know at the end. So it's the risk appetite of the company, the ability to investing in failure. That's the message I preach in ADNOC all the time, is that we have to have that appetite and the ability to invest in failure if we want to really succeed in digital.
I think there's other industries that have traveled this road before us. If you look at the tech industry, which is good at coining buzzwords, it's called pilot purgatory. Pilot purgatory is because of all these POCs, not just in our industry, that didn't go anywhere to produce significant business value. The logic, I think, as Nasser said, is you need to architect for the future and deliver now. The risk of just delivering the low-hanging fruit is you can't get the big fruit ever. right? So that's the kind of platform systems thinking that need to be part of your digital transformation strategy, right? You can go after short-term value, but you need to have a view for the long-term architecture that your enterprise needs to adopt, right? Otherwise, you have a bunch of pilots, and then you'll have those values. But those are always limited, right? They're not transformative to a company like Aramco, for example.
And just add to that, I wouldn't think of them as failures, they're learnings, right? Because every time you do something, you're learning something new. And the other thing is, I don't think it always has to cost tons of money. And so there's lots of things that you can do that actually are way cheaper than drilling an additional well. And so for an industry that's used to doing massive capital projects, right, I'm not sure that the digital transformation needs to be on exactly the same scale of spend. And we're kind of good at spending big money, so yeah.
Okay. We are just about out of time. We could maybe squeeze in one, the gentleman here. Excuse me.
I wondered if you had a view of where the most successful digital initiatives have been in your organisations recently. Where are you really seeing the value from some of these new technologies start to come through? Sure. Is it on? Okay. Did you hear that?
I think the question was, where have you seen them, where have been the most successful digital initiatives, strategies in your organisations in recent times? Start with Morag, with you at the end, if you like.
Okay, so I would say rich areas. So, and back to your point about low-hanging fruit, I think there's been some fairly more obvious areas in our kind of operating space, both in our upstream, downstream, where there's huge amounts of data which haven't necessarily been tapped in the past. And actually applying data there, I mean, it's kind of easy to get into first base if you've never done it before at all. So that would be my quick answer because I'm looking at the time.
Okay. For us, it has been in the predictive analytics.
Yeah.
Predicting, predictive maintenance, predictive analytics. It's, we understand maintenance very well. I think that's one thing that most oil companies, we do very well. We do the maintenance. And doing predictive, it really had freed up time and created very fast value, going from a different traditional maintenance model to a predictive model.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. We should leave it there. Please join me in thanking our panellists for spending some time with us this afternoon.